There we go. Hello. I think somebody's in the, okay, great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Friday. You did it. You made it. And welcome to Net's series, Inspiration on Demand, Creators in Conversation. We're just so happy that you are here to gather with us today. My name is Patricia Garza. I'm the I'm going to keep calling myself new, Director of Programs and Engagement here at NET. I am a Latinx human with kind of short, faded red hair. It's getting longer and longer. Purple cat-eye glasses. And I'm in my office today with many children's books behind me. And I'm wearing a very colorful shirt with lots of leaves that are orange and blue with a navy background. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the indigenous peoples on the traditional stewards of the land on which I am currently standing, but also want to invite you to do so as well. I'm zooming in from Tongva land in East Los Angeles, California. So we'll put a link in the chat if you want to participate in the land acknowledgement today, if you need to research whose land you're on. I use they, them pronouns, but I also accept she, her, hers verbally. And we'll go ahead and put that link in the chat if you want to do land acknowledgement. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues that are in the Zoom with me. So if you want to just give a little wave or a hi in the chat, Alicia Tonzik, our Executive Director here at NET, and Nicole Shiro, our Finance and Operations Manager. Thank you, Alicia, Nicole, for being here. And if you have any technical needs or questions, you can throw those in the chat and Alicia and Nicole will help me out. Thank you. I also want to do just a quick access check and logistics. So access needs, we are recording this for future viewing. We will be putting that on our YouTube channel, very fabulous, and putting a link on our website as well. So if you want to share this later, or if you know a friend or a colleague who wanted to be here but couldn't be here live, we'll go ahead and record it, as you noticed at the top. The chat is enabled, so please participate, put your questions in there, put comments in there, but please be mindful with the private DMs. We do get a full roster of those, so just want to be clear about that. Not that I go through them, but just to be honest. And if you need closed captioning, you should be seeing just transcriptions live, but if you don't, or if you want to make those disappear for you, you can click on the closed caption live transcript button, which is on the toolbar ribbon right below us, and put, or just go ahead and put it in the chat, and hopefully we can direct you to the right area. I also just wanted to take a moment today, at the end of a pretty long week, I want to acknowledge the uptick of violence that has occurred these past few weeks. Now more than ever, we need to check in with each other, with ourselves, our family, our neighbors, and our community. NET would like to stand in solidarity with our AAPI community members. And as a resource, I wanted to lift up folks that are really driving this in the theater field, the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists. What they're currently doing is they're putting out calls to action on their website, and we'll put that link into the chat. They're also having a hashtag campaign on their social media channels, and they just put out a PSA yesterday. So check out those resources and lift up the amazing work that they're doing. It's so important for us to be there for one another. So I appreciate you all being here today. So what are we doing here today? So to anchor us in what this series is, it's NET's 25th birthday. And if you've been here before, you've heard me say this, so apologies for the repeat. But we here in NET wanted to create a space to come, to gather, to get a spark of inspiration when you need it. We co-created this series with our amazing board of directors, in hopes that we can share this space with you all here in Zoomlandia here, but also on demand for later viewing if people are not able to come. So we posed this question to our board: who are your mentors? Or who are the artists you admire that inform and activate your own ensemble practice? And you all, we got such great responses, including Dr. Carrie J. Cole today. I'm so excited. And we also will be announcing more as the months roll on. We have one a month. I think folks saw in our e-blast, Todd London is going to be next with the iconic Andre Gregory. So that's in April. So you have to check that out. All right. So I think it's time for the main event. If I had a drum, I would I would drum it out. So I'm going to give a very condensed, the briefest bios for our amazing guests, just for folks who may be not familiar, but they can fill in the gaps as well. And very bridged. So I just want to say that. So I want to welcome our guests, co-artistic directors of Submersive Productions, Ursula and Glenn. So happy to have you here. Submersive Productions is a collaborative artworks company in Baltimore that creates original site-specific immersive works where artists and audiences engage together at the intersections of histories, mythologies, and the immediate experience. Love that. Ursula, I'll shout you out first. Ursula is a performing and visual artist who is fed by two distinct practices. One consists of being a part of a highly collaborative works on a grand scale, while the other resides in independently creating artwork that is personal, quiet, and celebrates the wonder to be found in small everyday things. Each practice informs and balances the other. So I can't wait to hear more about that. And Glenn, welcome. As a composer, sound designer, performer, lighting designer, and video artist, Glenn Richie has been working with time-based media for over 3 decades. And of course, who's going to be guiding our conversation today is NET board member Carrie J. Cole. Carrie is associate professor, producing director, and assistant chair in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. As a scholar, her work concentrates on current and future trends in U.S. theater, performance, and popular culture, specifically staging science fiction and the fantastic. Many more credits as well, including plays that you've adapted, directed, and provided dramaturgy for. Dr. Cole currently serves as the secretary for NET's board. So, Carrie, I'll pass it to you to get us started.
All right. Thank you very much, Patricia. It's such a pleasure to be here and see familiar faces and new faces. I am Carrie J. Cole. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm zooming in from the traditional lands that are at a nexus of the Osage and Susquehannock in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is in Pennsylvania, not in Indiana. Through that. And I'm really delighted to be here with you all today. A quick physical description. I am a white middle-aged woman, happily just hit 50 last week. Super excited about it. Letting the hair go natural. It's short because my hairstylist is also a paramedic, and so safe practices, right? And I'm wearing a kind of claret colored top and glasses that are green, but you can't tell. Oh wait, no, they're not the green ones, they're the clear ones, never mind. And I'm so happy to be having this conversation. Before I pass it over to Ursula and Glenn to introduce themselves a little bit and where they're coming in from. I loved that Godfrey and Leslie had this long-standing relationship, and we got that history and of that mentorship. I really took the tack of these are some people that really inspire me because I've been following their work for years, and we met via Zoom for the first time last week. So I'm really excited about just having a great conversation. Ursula and Glenn, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Glenn Richie, he, him, his pronouns. In my description, I'm a white male in my middle ages. It's funny how it capitalizes middle ages, and I just left it that way. Olive skin tone, dark razor stubble, black hat covering my COVID hair, red and black plaid shirt. I might occasionally put on and take off glasses.
Thank you for the introduction, Carrie. I am Ursula Marcum. I am a white middle-aged woman with salt and pepper, mostly salt, shoulder-length hair, and I'm wearing a cornflower blue shirt, and I have my favorite glasses with their purple frames. And we are zooming in from the unceded lands of the Piscataway and Nanticoke peoples. I will tell you too that we live in the city. I apologize in advance for any of the city sounds that may occur during our conversation.
We should also acknowledge, because I know this is going out to a national audience, that we're proudly representing Baltimore and its vibrant art scene, and that is unlike anywhere else. But we also need to acknowledge that wherever this conversation goes, that we live in a majority Black city, and we are two white leaders of a racially diverse organization. That said, we'd like to elevate some Black-run organizations before we move on. There's some long established and some up and coming who are doing some amazing work. And this is just a little list.
Yes, and that includes Arena Players, Arts Centric, Afro House.
And I think we're going to drop these in a chat somewhere. So if you're fumbling for a notebook, look there. Fools and Madmen, Two Strikes Theater Collective, the UB Blake Cultural Center is a nice hub of activity, and Wombworks production.
And this week, especially as Patricia noted, it's been a long couple of weeks, and we really want to lift up our friends at Asian Pacifica Arts Collective here in Baltimore. But anyway, come to Baltimore. There's great stuff to see.
Yes, and actually, that's a great kind of transition to the why. I really wanted to have this conversation with Ursula and Glenn. The last live production I was able to see was a submersive production called See Also. I've been following your work for a number of years now because I love the way it intersects with so many interesting ideas, but also how much it is place-based in some ways. That place may shift, and you may purposely shift how we experience that space with your work. But the idea of being able to see some of these Baltimore companies the next time I visit just fills me with great joy. And I love to see how people are making their plans to reopen. But I wanted to kind of jump in with a quick acknowledgement / question because I'm intrigued by how you position yourselves not as a theater company, but as a production company, and that it's theater doesn't necessarily capture what you do as much as say ensemble does, or the production work. So could you speak about how you came to the name of your ensemble?
So it is really important to note that we come to this work as artists with a very wide array of endeavors. But submersive for us, the most important part of what we're doing is getting people in a place where they feel that they can be a part of the world, but also maybe open up to having conversations that they might not otherwise have. But to play to get there. And so submersive is a combination of immersive and subversive. And we're trying to kind of just sneak our way into getting people to open up to some other ideas, or even just conversation with people that they might not have conversation with.
Excellent. And I think, as I said, the places where you bring people together, I think have a really interesting relationship with your work too. The piece that I saw was at the Peabody Museum at Johns Hopkins University called See Also. If you go to the Submersive Productions website, you can see some images there, and there's some video there as well. But you had a longstanding relationship with the Peel Center, and I'm wondering if you could talk about how the work there is embedded in that building, but that community. And then the transition out of there and the inadvertent fortune of being in a different space as the pandemic hit. That's a lot at once. So
Yeah, wow. So
take whichever part you want and go.
we did set out early on to be a site-specific company, and our first show was in the Enoch Pratt House, which was built in the 1840s. And the show that we did was the Mesmeric revelations of Edgar Allan Poe, and we like to think that Poe maybe at some point walked by that house because he was alive at the time it was built. And and that was a relationship with a museum that owned that house, and so it was a natural transition for us to go to the Peel, which is the first building in the country built to be a museum. It was the first time someone said, let's make a place intentionally to put things in and have people visit these things. Before that, museums were in parlors and people's private homes and such. So all of that history went into that show in a big way, which was H.T. Darling's incredible museum, which was a museum of artifacts that were pilfered from another planet. And that let us go in all kinds of crazy directions in space and time. We brought in all these puppets to play the aliens and a human to play an alien. And we had our character, H.T. Darling, who was this sort of daring adventurer. And we got to sneak in some pretty clear, I think, but also very sneaky colonialism themes throughout that story. And we were lucky we were in at the time that we did. Now the Peel Center became very busy. Right now it's very busy being renovated. They've done an amazing job with a capital campaign there. But we took over the entire building at the time, which is like 10,000 square feet. And it was a pretty ambitious endeavor. And I think a lot of people saw that and said, okay, maybe we could trust them with other places. So we were in the War Memorial. If no one's been inside the War Memorial, it's directly facing the state capitol building. City Capitol building. Sorry, yes, Baltimore City Capitol. And it's just an amazing interior. It's one of the largest interiors. And we did a piece called Mass Rabble in there, where we filled up the entire center space of this huge room, and the audience and the performers were all sort of in the mix together. And then, the George Peabody Library, one of the most beautiful libraries in the country. The whole time we were there, everybody was like, I can't believe we're doing a show. I can't believe they're letting us do a show in here. But we did it.
Yeah.
I would say too that Baltimore is a very historical city. It has many beautiful buildings, but a lot of our work, well, all of our work is really interested in reckoning with history and grappling with history, and also reimagining history in ways that let us tell new stories and different stories, and sometimes even tell the story that we would prefer to tell. So these buildings are very much characters in every production, and their history informs dramaturgically, but even physically, the way that we create a piece and how we have the audience move through the space.
We always make it very clear early on in our engagement with these organizations that we never do pure historical reenactment. We've never done we've never produced a play that was already pre-written or interpreted a fiction piece. Even the Edgar Allan Poe piece was really clear. We're not going to be just simply performing Edgar Allan Poe's work in different rooms in this house. It's going to be it's be more of a response piece from where we're at, responding to his artwork. In that case, taking all these stories of the women in his life and fiction and giving those life.
I really saw that revisioning of history of the lifting up the subverted history in C also. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the process of that creation and how you create in general.
The act of collaboration is front and center in everything that we do. But we are very much a company that starts with movement and visualization and building ideas together in an ensemble way before any text is written. And there have been pieces that we've done without text at all. But for C also, which is an astonishingly beautiful library space. The group of us went to the library together for the first time, and the first thing that we all noticed was they still have a card catalog. There are many of you who may not know what a card catalog is, but before the internet, people had to have ways to find all the books that were in the library, so they wrote each book down on a little card and put it in a big wooden cabinet. And we were so enchanted with all of the thoughts and ideas just by opening a drawer and looking in and seeing what popped up for us and where that led us and how each of those connections were made. And that became the physical manifestation of the idea that everything is connected. And all of these stories that are tucked sometimes very deeply into this collection could be lifted up and brought to the fore and have the audience respond to those and interact with those.
We also worked with the director of their special collections to help us highlight and identify collections of specific women in their collections. And we created what we called character composites, that we went through this whole sort of early discovery phase, and then eventually the cast were assigned characters to represent. But we called them character composites because they were built usually of 2 or 3 different women.
Sometimes more.
But we gave each one of them some sort of facsimile of something from the collections to sort of get started with and to speak to, and used that as our starting point.
It's great. I have to say that kind of connection and the threading together of ideas. At one point, as an audience member, I was with one of I think of them as docents at the card catalog, and they suggested that I open the card catalog and pick a card, and it's completely random, y'all. I chose the card that was on the person who I did my thesis on. So it's just that inadvertent connections and threads that happened. The creation of these character composites I thought was really interesting. Is that something that threads through your process generally, or?
Yeah, you could definitely say so. Whether it is a specific historic human being or inspired by a fictional character as well, or we just have an idea for a character, but then we try to find, something to root it in. So there's always some of that. Even looking forward, a couple shows we're going to do in the future are going to be future fiction, but we're already starting to think about, okay, where is it going to be rooted, and like what happening right now that might root what is going to be happening. It's sort of a different way of looking at it. But yes, absolutely, we always look to history and then the subverting of, uncovering of the first telling and the retelling, and thinking, where can we take it to make you think more about it?
Yeah. One of the things in our conversation last week that really caught my imagination was the way you described how you work in ensemble at that creative pretext way, or that pretext moment, and the idea of I actually wrote it down, how you create the conditions before you create the text, and what that really implies in terms of the overall structure of your ensemble. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how you create the conditions, and who decides what those conditions are.
That's a great question. We like to be together in a room. We miss being together in a room with our collaborators very much, but we like to start in breath and in movement. And we also, when we show up, as Glenn was talking about, we bring a lot of primary sources with us that are thematically related. So in this case, we had this amazing collection, but we had letters, we had sheet music, we had images, we had sound, we had books. We had all sorts of things that we were bringing into the room, the very first meeting that we all had. And what's really important is trusting the people that you're with and building trust together in one another. And we would have all sorts of exercises, both movement and improvisation exercises related to these documents and items, but also just in conjunction with one another physically. And we would write in response after that, or we would discuss. There's a lot of talking that goes in making devised work, as well as breathing and moving together. And all of those things begin to lead us to make those other connections. So we would have a workshop about this one specific item, and then that someone would say in the the collaborative, what about this? What about this? And then we'd start to make those connections and keep growing that story until we were to a point where we felt like we could begin to sculpt what was actually going to be told and what the audience would have a chance to find.
Awesome. I love the fact that trust is being lifted up in the chat as well. And it is so important to create that, particularly in ensemble work, as we know, but with immersive work, I think the layers and of trust, I think, are so nuanced in so many ways. Yes, and thank you, Shannon. Power is always in the room, and how we embrace that and share that, I think, is so fundamental to so much of what we're thinking about right now, particularly when we've had so much power taken away from us in the last year in particular. So I'm wondering, C also closed just before Baltimore closed as a city, correct? I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the choices you made as an ensemble in deciding what you would do in this pause in this pandemic time. You know, initially when we thought, oh, it'll be a few weeks, and then as things progressed.
Yeah, so I guess I should back up and explain what you refer to now as our ensemble. So we have a larger collective of about 50 people who we've worked with over time and we are in regular contact with, and we call them officially the Submersive Collective. And then we have a more immediate circle of artistic associates. There are 9 of them.
There are 9 of them.
If you can go to submersiveproductions.com and you can see them, scroll down. So they function sort of as our, in a way, as our board and as our advisors, but we are all the artists who make the work. And we've chosen very deliberately to have whatever we call the organization be as small as possible and have the power out in the projects. Like all the money and the effort and the time goes into building the projects and the teams for that project. Every project has a different team. Every project has a set of leaders, and we call it the core team. So in terms of when we're thinking about representation and the voices that are going to be in the room, it all starts with that core team and then adding first from the collective, and then we usually like to bring in people from outside the collective too, to keep building relationships, and on and on. It sort of keeps going and growing. And we had huge plans for last year about how to grow that. We wanted to have weekly open workshops and become more open about our process and about our whole ideology behind it and who we are, and that all had to get scrapped. And yeah, a lot of projects had to, of course, get scrapped. Everyone went through that last year. But we then spent a good bit of time thinking about, well, what does this mean to structure our company this way? And of course, what does it mean to be to do actively anti-racist work? Like, we're still day by day figuring out what does that mean for us? And then getting it down on paper and being more explicit about it than we ever have before. We thought, it was okay to have these ideals and we would talk about them, but don't be too, there's this, I don't know, there's this thing about immersive theater that it has to be all super mysterious. And I think we were swept up in that a lot. It's like, no, you don't actually like sell them a ticket and they don't just show up and get stamped. And no, you have to like tell them, go to the third door and knock 3 times and it gets, things get weird. And I want to keep some of that mystery and preserve the mystery and wonder of it. But I also want to be more aware of where are we setting up gateways that are keeping certain people out unintentionally. Like we want to preserve this gift that is an unwrappable gift, but where are those gateways? So in some of it, making fully explicit our history and ideology vis-a-vis race, which you can read on our website. If you just, it's in linked in a couple places. It's our policy statement, and that was a big step for us. But it was based a lot on from the voices of the BIPOC folk in our group saying, "Oh, when I go check out a theater company, I look at their website and I see what they have to say before I decide, do I want to waste my time with these people?" So that was, and then the investigation and just the conversations that were required to put that all together were so valuable. And I felt like the year that we had to pause and work on that was such a gift that we had. And we were able to recommit with each other and find new ways to build trust.
Great. Yeah. I love the fact that it was really about articulating things that you had in process and that your ensemble members, your collective, were bringing forward in that moment as well. And I find it really intriguing because you do have the opportunity as in production world, you work in a lot of different media that you could have chosen to do a lot of mediated productions, virtual productions, but you were at a good point, having just closed a show to take that kind of breath. But you did say that you had a couple of projects that were in process. What happened to where are they now in the process, and how has the pandemic affected where you're going next?
We actually have 4 different projects in the works at the moment, and we are very grateful to Zoom, we have to say, because there's all that talk time has allowed us to spend a lot of time with each other, even if it was virtually. But we've been able to keep developing ideas and keep slowly moving these projects forward. And every project that we do is very different from the other, but one of the ones that we're most excited about is that future fiction piece that Glenn was talking about. And what we've decided to do with that one is we are starting with design. So we have an idea of what the world might be, and then designers, costume designers, prop designers, and all sorts of other visual arts folks are contributing to making objects, which they can do safely from their homes. And then we are going to be delivering those costumes and objects out to some of our collective members to devise with on their own in their home, and then create and generate ideas about that project that we can all share in a virtual way so we can all still be safely working together. And our hope is that as the weather warms up and things get, knock on something, safer, we can be outside working and be workshopping this in public, and then have random passersby also experience some of this work as we're generating it. So that's been a silver lining in all of this. It's like, oh, well, this is a new way for us to think about working together.
Yeah.
I think there's something a lot of your ensembles can relate to, is that in this group can relate to, is that so much can come up in a workshop and you're like, wow, that could have been a whole show. And you're like, you write it down, you're like, we'll get back to that. And maybe you don't. So, because then like the real show comes and that becomes this machine that you just can't, get out of the way. And so we were thinking, oh, let's actually let's make this a prologue and just give it a whole other name, this project, to the eventual in-person experience. And so that's going to be a far future fiction. And the thing we're going to do this summer will be more of a near future fiction experience. If you sign up for a newsletter, well, we're going to announce this really soon. Like I have all the text like over here, and just have to put it in MailChimp, you know. So but the idea of like workshopping in public, we have all these people we have so much trust and confidence in that I know like pretty quickly we'll get to a place where we can turn on a camera and just go live to Instagram or whatever, and it will be a thing. It'll be pretty cool. And I just know at some point it'll tip to that. And I like how we're starting with the design stuff first, but these performers who know these designers and kind of know the intentions and where stuff might be going are going to take it and then take it to another place that none of us have thought about before. And yeah, it's an exciting new way to work, actually.
Great. Out of curiosity, how often do you show your work in process to your audiences, and how do you curate those audiences?
We always have test audiences with immersive theater, especially since the audience is another character in the show. We have to have times when we're sharing it with other people in order to see what works and what doesn't. And in the very beginning, in the very first passes, we pull from people who have been to our prior shows. So we have a mailing list, and we reach out to our mailing list, and we reach out to our supporters and ask them to come in and give us their immediate feedback. But we've had wonderful experiences by reaching out to some of the K through 12 schools in Baltimore City and had them come and be our test audiences. We've had places where we've said, bring a friend, any friend, we don't care, just bring them and let's see what happens. But we always have a conversation after they've had an experience of whatever it was that we showed them. And that has been absolutely integral to the work, and it's now built into the process every time.
Great. Part of my thinking, I just want to acknowledge that Mark Seldes is right below you in my little screen, and having been part of their process audiences, I thought, hey, wait a second. How often does that happen for this ensemble? One of the things that I was thinking about with submersive productions too, and it kind of loops back to part of where we started in terms of acknowledging that Baltimore is a majority Black city, and that it also has a popular culture. There's a stereotype that we see in TV and film of what that means. How much do you see your work on the live theater, live performance scale versus the TV and film, working with or against the tropes of the city, and which ones are you particularly interested in lifting up next?
So the next I'll go to first, I guess, is that we're going to use, I don't want to give away everything, but we're going to use a park in the middle of the city that seems particularly well suited for what we're going to do, but it's a park, but it also still feels very much like a city. And we were thinking that it's another thing that got scuttled is we thought, well, let's just do a storefront installation. And we realized, well, we want to have like an opening of the storefront installation, and we still can't have 20 people around. And the idea, the process of looking for locations for storefronts made us think, okay, we're going to be putting art in this neighborhood and speaking to the people walking by this every day. And what are we saying, and how can they be included? And so that always has to go into our thinking. If we're going to be using this park, who else is using this park, and who drives by this park and thinks about it, and who rather than just thinking we are taking this encapsulated artwork and installing it in this place. And that is how I think we've approached most of our work, is trying to be respectful and knowledgeable of the very neighborhood that it's in.
I would add, though, that all of our work everything is about having the majority be about women. So our cast is majority women. Our crew is majority women. Our production team is majority women. But women is a very small word for a very large group of people who are widely and wonderfully varied in all the ways. And so for us, the most important part is just getting as many different kinds of women working on these shows and telling, and their stories are in the stories that we're telling because they influence what we lift up and what we focus on. And Baltimore it is such an amazing, vibrant place that I always think, when we've heard some of the tropes about Baltimore, but there's nothing on television that even can ever describe any city or any place, right? So for us, it's the most important thing is just being open to the people who are in the room. Bring it back to these people that are in this room, and let's figure out how they can all be a part of telling this story.
Now that you say that about Baltimore and tropes, I was reminded that the very first run of our very first show happened during the uprising following Freddie Gray's death. And the first night back, so we had to cancel a couple shows. And then the first night back, we're like, well, what do we do? We feel like we have to respond or change or do something, and we ended up changing one word of the entire thing. And, it was otherwise, the story that we were telling did not address that particular moment in time happening outside of the show. And yet the audience came in and you can feel it. And there's something about that, in the space between the performance and the audience and the performers in the show, that it was one of the most memorable, like really electric evenings, even though the show didn't address it. And there's just something about immersive theater specifically where you can't escape the negotiation between people that no matter what it is about, it is always about that. And it is always has to be about what the audience brings into the room.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of what might be happening in the audience and what they're bringing in at any given time. And so you have a heightened awareness of the historical period that you are currently in while you're making a piece because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that all of the thoughts that are going on in my brain with that, and particularly with immersive theater in this pandemic moment, and how folks have done some virtually immersive stuff, some hybrid stuff, and wondering where do you see this portion of performance, immersive performance, heading out of the pandemic? How do you think the pandemic, the white supremacy and shift to active anti-racist theater and performance, can you see if you're predicting the future, where do you see both submersive productions, but this kind of ensemble immersive work heading?
Well, I really enjoyed the first one of these interviews last month, and what Godfrey and Julie kept bringing it back to is like, how do we get it back to the people? And one of the things about immersive theater is that you bring people in and you make a community right then and there. You've got this little community for the next hour or two, or however long you're in this world. And it's got to be about that. Anything that we do moving forward has to be about community. It has to be about engaging the larger community that we're in, but it's also about building that trust and being able to work with our artistic community. And I think that if we can make those worlds and make those spaces in a place where all the community can come in and engage with ideas and be thinking about things and maybe have conversations or maybe build on that. And I think that there's real power in this collaborative community model. And I think we've got to just stop thinking about everything as these top down. It's like I said, so you do. It's just not going to work that way. And I think immersive theater is uniquely positioned to make artistic work that brings that to the fore.
I have so many thoughts about to answer this question. So one major concern I have is, maybe in a year or so we may have, another whole sort of area of accessibility, in terms of having two classes of people, like one who are vaccinated, healthy, and fearless, and are able to do every immersive theater thing we did before, but a big group of people who will not be fearless, who will have many misgivings about going into a room of strangers with an unknown exchange.
Yes.
And so do we have to, really think about, how do we create separate tracks? And we've thought about that in our past work, but it's going to have a whole sort of different layer of needs there, I think. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, starting outdoors is a start. The other thoughts will come back to me. Oh, well, one big thing was the premise of this upcoming experience started with the idea, and it's funny, but not really funny at all. The idea was that there is a virus that requires people to really radically distance. Actually, no two people could cohabitate in this story, but it was about the pre-COVID, the distancing we were doing voluntarily through social media and whatnot, and the emotional distance we were creating, and we were going to use this virus as a metaphor. Well, what happened. So there's a lot less that we have to explain or set up. It's like if you read the novel Station 11 today, it's a completely different novel than it was a couple of years ago. So but we've been able to do all this research too and think, okay, there's all this stuff we don't have to explain. How do we take that story way further now that we don't have the burden of having to explain what a pandemic might be like? So
Right.
that's a direct effect of what happened.
Yeah, my colleagues in science fiction books in particular have had that same kind of moment where all of these books that have been in production about apocalyptic viruses that are coming out now feel almost too late, but it's a 2-year process.
Octavia Butler is really having a moment now, I think, and we're rereading a lot of her work right now.
For sure. There's some really fascinating crossovers, I think, there as well. But again, I'm showing my bias there in how I like to read all of the performance that I view it through that kind of lens. So I just happened to notice that.
Question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to click some space. We have some beautiful folks here. If anybody wants to comment or thoughts on what we heard or have questions for the group, please, you could just speak yourself into space. You can put it in the chat and Carrie and I can look in the chat or whatever is easiest for you.
I will say with this group in here, one of the things that I really keyed into early on was the fact that you actively seek out collaborators from outside of your collective to grow your network, but also to grow the ideas. And that just made me think about during the pandemic pause, when NET had to put a pause on the macro fests, which in many ways is about bringing those folks together and the plans we have for the future of what that looks like in a vaccinated world are really exciting to me. And the idea, I'm just going to put it out there right now. I'm on sabbatical next year. I am going to be on the road. So and any of the ensemble folks that are in here, I may just reach out to you and say, hey, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods in this 3-week span. Let's get together and talk about how we can figure out what's next and connect across the country and across different ways of doing ensemble work. So I'm just putting that out there right now. Super excited.
I did have a question around, if somebody sees your work and is inspired by your work, how do they get involved in the company? Like, do you all have a process, or is it more kind of organic where they come to shows and get to know you, or you're just putting that question in?
A little of both. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that we noticed early on was that people wanted to stay after the show and talk with other people who had experienced the show specifically. So we've now built that into the process too. We always try to have at least a couple of minutes where people can be in conversation, and we make ourselves available to people if they would like to, if they say, hey, how do I get on your mailing list, or how can I be involved in a show? Or so we're always taking in information that way. But of course, the more people that you have in your collective, the more people they know. And so all of those brains are able to say, oh, I've got a friend who's a nurse who would really like to know more about this show. So, we're always sort of gathering that way too.
Yeah, and just having been to one of our shows does help a lot, and be able to talk about what spoke to you about it, and then figuring out what your skills are. Something we haven't mentioned is that we do invite the entire entire artist into the process. So you may come primarily as a performer, or maybe just like a lighting designer, but if you have other skills and other ideas, we want to hear them. And because when you're doing world building, it's like there's never enough. Like there's always more you can do, and you want to get more complete thoughts and ideas than just, okay, I can put a light up there and aim it that way. Like you want it to be completely thought through, like what does it mean and where is it going, where does it come from? So like a lot of our artists are multi-hyphenate and do work in all those different ways. So that is a good thing to bring, is a broader awareness of what you might bring to a project. But then we just the whole idea of having these workshops and having people just sort of show up. Like showing up is so important, and show up and just being around what we do and sort of figuring out, okay, is this for me? It doesn't have to be for everybody. And am I really connecting with this? And that, and then talking about it and going from there. That's sort of the best way to bring people in. So it is like a gradual onboarding. We've only once had something you would call an audition. We never do auditions, but what we called an audition was a 3-hour workshop in which everybody was in the room working together at the same time. And we just had different members of the collective lead different sections of it. And we wanted to just do more of that and just get to know people rather than audition.
That's great.
Well, we're at the time. We're at the sad time, or the good time, I guess, to celebrate you all in this amazing conversation. And I just want to thank, Carrie, for, your leadership in putting this together, and Glenn and Ursula for inspiring us on this beautiful Friday and going into the weekend. This is so great. I mean, just looking at these places that you performed, and thanks to Alicia for putting all those links in the chat, it's like, wow, it's so incredible. That's just so awesome. I'm going to dig even deeper. The library is just like stunning.
You actually can get the Peabody Library as a Zoom background. It's gorgeous.
It makes a great background.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first. So next month, again, we'll be in conversation with Todd London and Andre Gregory, director, actor, writer, Dinner with Andre. I'm sure folks know. But I also want to remind folks, we have Pay What You Can membership right now. So we will put a link in the chat. Join at any price point that you're able to. We want to have you involved in that. We have some great things coming up. Or engage with us in social media. We'll also put those links in. We do Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you need. We will be there. And I just want to thank these amazing guests again, and you all for showing up today and being with us. It's just so fun to share space with everybody and see your beautiful faces. So I appreciate that. So happy Friday, you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.